In the bottom left, as the red Zerg, he is Serral. At one point, he was undeniably the best player in Europe, with a little bit of a drop here or there. Maybe he didn't win Katowice, but he won almost everything else. And now, here, 2020, September 19th, we are saying, well, is he though? Is he better than these two guys?
Is he?
Does he actually get to the round of 4? I don't know. I don't know about that.
Hard question to ask. I mean, this is this to me is what makes following any sort of competitive sport, esport, whatever. It's the most engaging part for me is when you get to see the players that either come in, right? Your undrafted free agent level guy that's like, people are like, yeah, he's not really that good. And then he steps up at some point and you're like, okay, this guy's actually better than we thought. Or when we get to hype prospects like Clem, who people were talking about for a really long time, much in the same way that people talked about Raynor. Raynor, I remember all the memes years and years and years ago. Raynor is not a name that just jumped onto the scene and was suddenly one of the best players. People were like, oh yeah, this 13-year-old Italian kid got Grandmaster, right? Like, oh, he's really good. Yeah, he can't beat like the top pros, but he's only 13, right? Like the ceiling is pretty much the sky for him. And, you know, we got to see that develop into something really big. And there were a lot of similar discussions about Clem. And as he's matured as a player and as a human, he's been greatly improving at StarCraft, you know, even though we talked about how I think he was one of the players along with Raynor that were like on those weird bubble marks for some of the WCSs as far as the age requirement to play and all of that. Because they're like, yeah, we understand that you're playing video games, but we don't really have laws specifically for it. So it's still kind of child labor, right? We can't just have you going out here working a full-time job playing video games legally because we haven't really reached that point in humanity yet where we've accepted that kids are actually better at video games than a lot of the grown adults. But and he's allowed to play now. He's a monster. And this, I think, if you're a Clem fan out there, you're hoping that this is that moment where he makes that big splash, overwhelms Serral, and gets into a hell of a series against Raynor. But I think saying that he is favored against either of them would still be stretching. I think at best he's even, and that's going to make this very exciting to see what goes down, because Serral, he's in a similar spot where he's trying to defend his own titles, defend his own legacy, because people are starting to lean a lot more in Raynor's favor than him. You know, he used to have everybody on his side. He was the Woody, but now Raynor is Buzz Lightyear, and things are not as good as they used to be for our Finnish Zerg player.
The sad music in the background, like the tiny music, I don't remember what it was called. Yeah, starts playing for Serral. That's an amazing analogy. Yeah, you know, Clem is at least on par with them. You know, unless he's having a bad day, or, you know, TBT maybe still a question mark for him as well, right? But and while it's hard to defeat, I guess, Raynor's like surge onto the scene they did, he was allowed to play. He almost made it to BlizzCon and won tournament. The tournament he was first allowed to play, Montreal 2018. Well, it's hard to beat that. Clem has really come close just in the amount of respect and clout he's garnered throughout the community in the last basically 6 months. So very cool stuff. And you're right, Serral's kind of defending like, no, I am still the GOAT. I'm still the best. I'm just, you know, it's only 1 or 2 tournaments here and there. It's actually not a, you know, it's not consistent. I'm supposed to win all these things. And I think he can. As cool as Clem's play is, and as much as I did favor him in those predictions, it's like you never count Serral out, ever, no matter what the matchup, no matter what the person. So if he wins, not at all shocked. But if he doesn't, then that conversation about, well, who is number 2 on the European circuit is actually really thrown into question, and much less number 1, actually, because Serral's supposed to be number 1, right? But interesting stuff. Exactly. We've kind of covered all the pretty basic TVZ opener with the more interesting talk about the story, but now to talk about the openers a little bit more. 6 Hellions, no more, no less, into the 3rd CC, a single Liberator for harassment, and Serral going for what looks to be that faster Spire over the faster upgrades.
Yeah, and I do like the Hellions still.
I take that back. No more, no less, actually. He just showed 6 Hellions, and I felt fooled. I was fooled. Serral is not going to be fooled for very long, actually. His Overlord just now sees it, but I don't think he was prepared for 10. We're going to find out.
No, you know, you don't really see Terrans build this many Hellions, but the reason why you would do this is to try to take down those Zerg players who do overload on Lings. And, I mean, this is why you overload on Lings. That drone is eating creep tumor. Feels bad, man. Oh, I see. It's blocking the hatchery. Never mind. Makes sense, man. And the queens are just going to drop more in its place. But it was a cute maneuver by Clem. But that's the hard part about it is these Zerg players, particularly Raynor and Serral, are so good at, oh, yeah, you know I build Lynx. You're going to build Hellions? Well, actually, I don't care about Hellions. You better get Blue Flame if you want to use Hellions against me ever. Because regularly, they ain't going to do anything. And these Hellions, super dead. They can run forever, I guess. That's going to at least buy time for the third. Pretty clever way to just run away from that. I don't think Serral realized he was being debated like that. Because that command center moved before it even turned into an orbital, I'm pretty sure. So he's very anxious to get this third up and running so that he can have it solidified and secured, maybe build depots or a wall around it. But the Spire is going to start on the other side for Serral. He's getting his 1-1 together. Losing those Hellions hurts a lot, though. You know, just imagine being able to throw 10 Hellbats extra into your first push. Like, I know people are like, oh, Banelings killed them. They attack slow. But that's the whole point. If you have Marines and there aren't Banelings, it's very hard to lose as a Terran player.
Yeah. I mean, Serral had an excellent concave on top of those Hellions. Like, when it becomes 8 or 10 Hellions, like, having 16, 20 Lings suddenly isn't enough if they're not controlled well. If they at all bulk up at any given point, like the Hellions barbecue them. And that's what makes that opening threatening. It's why we've seen a little bit more. But Serral really did slap that down. So not only did it not do damage, it didn't necessarily force out that many Lings. And, obviously left Clem a little bit weak on that third CC. And yeah, he doesn't have Hellbats anymore for the push. So really not a great opener for Clem. Serral starting this game off very, very well. Serral also did not flap down that Spire as fast as I thought he was going to. He actually did get the Evolution Chamber, so end up 1-1. So the mutas are not going to be here to help with the Medivacs right now, but they are on the way. And Clem's going to have to build just a few missile turrets if he wants to, only focus on his army push.
Yeah, he's like trying to get this set up, trying to get ready to make this army push. And there's so much Ling Bane out there. And other things I always notice, right? The Baneling speed timing is always 100% on point. It's very hard to do these move outs with these small numbers of forces because these guys are so good at keeping those Ling counts up. They're so good at keeping these positions. They're basically saying, you have to push me with a lot more than that. And that's when the Zerg has the opportunity to be very cost effective or get those backstabs that we know these players are really good at. We haven't seen as much of it from Serral as he pushes this one away, but there's already a wall up for Clem too. Yeah, he got a complete wall around the mineral line, it looks like, on that third to make it harder for any units to run by over there. No turrets.
No turrets. So mutas just literally run over. They fly over. And that's a bit of a problem. Now Clem is doing an 8 rocks. It's really all about momentum. He can't really take the time away to pay attention to this. He's got to go for the push. Serral actually says, I'm not going to contest this. I know that you're more desperate than I am to have that base running as I just take down 14 SCVs and really distract your reinforcements. So I'm going to buy a little bit more time. Force you to be way too far in a creep. All the tanks on siege as well. And this is not a good fight. Even if Clem picks up 3 medevacs to go to the main base, this is not what Clem wanted from this game.
Yeah, the retreat on that fight looking a little bit like the Titanic. Not enough boats to get all these soldiers out, and losing the tanks is something that will definitely be felt by Clem later on. But perhaps, I guess the silver lining here is that those Mutalisks kind of got caught right behind that main and natural, so there's not really any way to punish the medevacs that are trying to run out. At the same time, I think if you're Serral, you're still pretty happy. You're on 4 bases, you've got the gold gas, and not only did you shut down that first attack, but you did a really good amount of damage on the backside. Those counterattacks were brutal and doesn't have enough space to pick them all up. Some of the Marines left behind and they die.
It's very defeatist to say it, but basically when this happens, even if the 8 rocks does manage to get maxed out again with a 2-2 push, it just kind of feels like it's already over because the Zerg player still has all this creep and they have a lot of time to set up surrounds and concaves and pick off your units as you come forward, and they know that you're on the timer, so they can kind of work around that. Whereas, for the 8 rocks player, they wanted to have more momentum to make the Zerg scramble a bit more so that when their 2-2 attack does hit, it really is like a 1-2 punch. So it's definitely not over. Clem feels like a good fight, but I feel like he's kind of not supposed to. As long as Serral does this right, and Serral has certainly been up against very good 8 rocks players, and he's pretty much always done it right.
Yeah, a good Widowmine spot to try and protect the tank, but the Overseer awareness, very good for Serral to be able to clear that up. And it's so hard because you can't just push on that one side. If he puts all the Marines on that ramp and tries to push down from the north position on this base, you have to worry about the Ling counterattack or just going for a backstab or a sandwich. So some Marines have to be left behind, which means you can't kill this base as fast as you want to. So Serral doesn't really need to commit his Ling Bane here as much or as regularly as he might normally do. And in fact, he's going to say, screw it. My other hatchery is about to finish. I'm going to just abandon this one because I know I have more bases than you anyway. It doesn't really matter. The Mutas on the backside kill both the medevacs at home for Clem. And these Marines being forced to stim and run all over the place, trying to hold on. No turret in the natural means we're going to see more SCVs die. Zombie Grub.
Yeah, Clem is not really making any headway. He is forcing Serral to give up bases, but it's literally the 300 minerals. He pulls all the drones away. He doesn't really waste that many resources defending it. He just says, yeah, I don't need it. Well, he does damage to Clem. It's far more important 3-base economy that is wearing thin as he wears thin on those minerals. Now, Clem does have a 4th base, so he's willing to play out this game, but he knows it's not a particularly fantastic spot. A little bit of focus fire there, take on as many banelings as possible, but now Serral has the map. Like, he just has all the map with creep, all the bases, the mutas keep him at home as much as possible. Clem, I think he's like, I feel like I already can see it in his camera a little bit, like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to play this game out, but just hope that Serral underestimates the power of his army. This is what I think can happen.
When you reach this point in a Terran versus Zerg, you know you've basically got one last attack that you can make. He doesn't have a big economy. It's one of the few things we used to see, but maps aren't really... a lot of the maps in this pool are not very good for splitting on the Terran side of things. It's not easy to cut the maps in half. The maps in this season have just been really large, or the bases have all been on the edges. Much like this map, almost all the expansions are just around the edge of the map. So you have a hard time just... oh yeah, I'm going to put down some planetaries and tanks and lock it down. No, you still kind of keep attacking. Look at this number of banelings. What? Okay, Serral.
That was actually terrible. That was terrible.
You deserve that.
Oh.
What are you doing?
Oh my god.
You can't just run 40 banelings into 5 siege tanks.
Oh no, that was
illegal.
That was the exact mistake that Clem was hoping would happen. Now the banelings first save, so it still means that he can't necessarily dive on a creep, but this is exactly what this type of momentum-based play wants to have happen. They want to get overconfident, and then the Zerglings, the Zerg uses all their banelings on stuff that's not actually quite cleaned up.
Ooh, tanks get hit from the back, though. The mutas are going to clean those up, and that means the Ling Bane, you don't have the anchor position for the bio anymore. He did a good job of cutting the creep tumors down, though, so he is going to have a clear staging ground for a follow-up, but he has the money there. Does he actually have enough? Does he, though? With just one
Flash is always the problem, right? Like, you're not exactly coming here with a 2 or 3 tank production or Widow Mines that might get, 2 Widow Mines get 1 amazing shot. Okay, there you go. It's not the situation when you do this. It's one of the definite weaknesses of the 8 racks when it doesn't work out. Even though Clem got a little bit there and got that creep tumors, I don't think Serral's too worried.
What strikes me as curious is that even TY with this build still tried to mix in a decent number of Marauders to help soak, but when it's all Marines, yes, you get the DPS, but you're squishy. You're very squishy, and these mutas now are in a large enough count. They've killed all the medevacs. These bio units are very low on hit points, so Clem once again chased back to his base, and he is at 120 supply against a Serral who's now getting his hive. Still has a lot of Lings, still has a lot of Banes, still has a very large number of Mutalisks. 16 is plenty to keep the pressure on Clem, and there's not really a transition path in sight here. This missile turret's going to get killed in that 3rd base. Again, Zombie Grub, a point of attack.
Just too difficult to keep that steady while you're also feeling the pressure to push into Serral. Fortunately, probably turtling is the best option, and then hoping that Serral gets overconfident with, again, Ling Baneling, or maybe he does the ultras in to throw the game. You can always hope that happens, but I don't think pressuring anymore is going to find him a lot of results. Serral's on 7 bases with still some pretty decent creep spread, still controlling the map with those mutas, and yeah, he's getting up to that hive, so I'm thinking just hoping the ultras get thrown. Thinking back to Thermal versus Stefano, like maybe Serral miscalculates against a defensive Terran.
It's just hard now that Serral has everything he needs, right? So back to what I was talking about earlier, with all this muta harass and everything going on, it's very hard to step out of your base without getting punished. This is a good grab, but as the Zerg starts to solidify more and more, this is what happens if you try to move out of your base. Now it's not, I can throw a couple Lings and Banes at you. Now it's like, no, I can send 15 Banelings to your 3rd to make sure I kill everything if you don't have units already prepared there. And it doesn't get any better, Zombie Grub. The reason why we would see those split map games where there's a ton of liberators, planetaries, mass ghosts, is because that is what's going to allow you to defend and try to burn out all the economy that the Zerg has. But those days are long gone too, especially because Zerg has some better tools to kill you in those situations, like the upgraded lurkers, outranging ghosts now kind of complicates things. So Clem feels like he has to keep just shoving Marines down Serral's throat, and typically you're supposed to see really, really big cost-effective plays in this, and he's ahead 5,000 resources. But these Marines, how's he going to kill all of these Banes? He's got a Baneling for almost every Marine that's over here.
Yeah, exactly. This is where a couple of tanks, a couple of Widow Mines are absolutely necessary. He's even being off of creep. Even if the Marines are trading out 2 for 1, it still wouldn't be enough. GG, Serral takes game number 1. That was Clem, right? Like, Clem made the choice and it didn't work out, both on the 10 Hellion opener that really didn't do damage, as well as the 8 Rax opener that didn't find momentum. He was cleaned up way too well with the first push where he lost all those tanks, right? So I know there's definitely some, talk and chat about like, oh, Terran can't win the late game. Well, not so much that. It's just that Clem chose basically a mid-game all-in. That's what we usually see the 8 Rax be, and if it doesn't work, they just tap out. Clem just thought maybe it could. It couldn't, but that's why we were kind of setting up this grim scenario for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that style, particularly that big 8 Rax play, is very much so a build that you win or lose on. You don't really transition out of that. All of your investments are into that bio infrastructure. That's why you'd never see the Terrans have more than 1 missile turret for the most part. That's why you'll never really have those tech units set up. You don't get the ghosts mixed in there. If you get either tanks or Widow Mines, maybe a Thor. But it's pretty much just, I'm gonna build a stupid amount of Marines and just try to overwhelm you, which can be really good. A lot of Terrans do it. It's not a bad build. That's like the thing in TVZ now. But right. I think the most important thing that you said, Zombie Grub, the 10 Hellion opening, not accomplishing anything. The reason why you don't see everybody go to 10 Hellions isn't because they don't necessarily do damage. It's because it slows everything else down that you want to do. You want to switch the factory off the reactor, build another one for your barracks, and then slam down those 2 racks right there, right? And if you do it after 4 Hellions, you've got your barracks really fast. After 6, you've got your barracks somewhat quick. 8 is kind of where most Terrans kind of aim for Hellion-wise, because Zergs do build so many Lings. But when you go to 10 Hellions, you really need to get something done with that, or at the very least, retain them for your first push. And he did neither of those things.
Exactly. It's really where it all started. But also, of course, big kudos to this guy for, not overstepping, not just saying, aha, I've won, I know I've won. Because it almost happened once, right? And that's where we saw Serral maybe worry for a second. But I think in general, he knew what to do. In the bottom right of Golden Wall, he is the red Zerg, Ensis Serral.
Yeah, and did a very good job deflecting the aggression from this man. In the southwest position of Golden Wall, he is Team Liquid's Clem.
You're absolutely right about the barracks call. It really does. I mean, you think about an extra 400 minerals when you go from 6 to 10. That is literally 2 barracks and then some. So it really does push that off, and it is a committal, even though we've been seeing it a little bit more. I think it is one of those things that gets added on. Zergs are like, oh, what? And then falls off pretty quickly because they're like, oh, it's a possibility. And in that case, Serral just had positioning in mind when he figured out what it was. That Overlord was in a pretty perfect position. Golden Wall is going to be an interesting map no matter what. And we see Serral already mining out the back.
Look at this drone. Look at this. Look at the way its hands move. It looks like he's like spinning he's spinning I don't actually know what the medical term is for the things that DJs spin, is it? But look at it. Look at him go. He's like slapping his hands, he's slapping his little turntable. He's like slapping his little claws, like they're like going across each other. I'm like, why is he crisscrossing his claws to mine these minerals? He's doing a little dance there.
He's actually like the PE classes in the 90s where they taught you to dance, and it was like the electric slide and also like the hand scissors, I believe it's called.
Yeah. I'm very happy I get paid to make analysis like that happen. That's beautiful. Side benefit, of course, you want to kind of mind that back door open if you're Zerg on this map, mostly because that is like the biggest staging ground for Terran players when they try to kill a Zerg early.
Right.
If we talk about Golden Wall and TVZ, the most notable thing is it kind of goes back to TVZ basics, but Zergs want to expand away from the Terran. They want it to be hard to reach them, and that because it also synergizes with large creep spread in the middle of the map. So the Zerg can kind of expand north forever, and it becomes progressively further away from where the Terran wants to be, who's usually going to be expanding a little bit more closer. They're going to try to get that gold base up, and they want to bring that harassment, bring that pressure. So the direct path, the south path, which is normally blocked off by all these minerals, is usually a really good place to set up that big siege tank push, where you can't really get to your units. You get to abuse the fact that Terran has a bunch of ranged units and Zerg does not. So Serral opening that up, I think the third base down there is not a bad call. He wants to be able to actually have a staging ground for defense there and spread creep from that position. But it does, for me, say that Clem should be looking to do a lot of damage with whatever his build is going to be, his opening build. I don't think it's really smart to play greedy versus Zerg on this map, because if you can't get something really big rolling on that south path, it can take a really long time to cross over and actually deal damage once you reach the mid-game stage.
I'm really happy that Clem went to mine out the middle. I think he specifically SCV scouted, not because he was worried Serral would do a pull first, but because he wanted to know if he had to mine out the middle. This at least gives you some harassment, as opposed to being forced to play into the bottom half of Golden Wall with creep spread, you know, at the wazoo, right? Like, you don't want that. We're moving things to the south on Golden Wall potentially, so just like a normal game, you don't want that creep spread. You don't want them just freely getting away with the drones. So I really like that from Clem. You're absolutely right. Like, there's also that chance for the one of the first abusive things that we saw on Golden Wall, you know, back 3 months ago at this point, was that tank push. But it's also like just the idea of Golden Wall is so unique, because there's the top side and the bottom side, and most people get used to the top side fights for various reasons, right? But when you bring it to the bottom, suddenly you are kind of putting some doubt in potentially Terran's mind, the guy who's supposed to be pushing more so, about where do I push? How do I push?
Yes.
Do I mine out my own back, or what happens here?
Yeah, and the thing is, usually while that bottom base can be safer, because you know there's it's kind of a bit of a high ground, the choke point for it isn't really huge, and the third base that's north of the natural is quite a bit more vulnerable. These Hellions, there's some opportunity there. I think 2 drones, not losing any of them makes me happy. 2 drones and you get out unscathed, that's nice. This one lane kind of gut checking that front. But because a lot of Terran players do builds like that 8 racks, for example, you usually see them try to grab the gold for the third, just because you want that extra mineral income. You don't need as many SCVs to saturate the base, which means more of your supply and early resources can be invested into things that are going to scale faster, right? You want the value, the stock of your army to be shooting up over time. But if you don't need as many SCVs to have the same amount of income, that's going to really allow you to get into that big marine production a minute or so earlier than you normally would to get that big bio parade push going.
Sarah, a little late to the pull. He put a sport crawler knowing that this was a high possibility, and it didn't quite micro. Was a bit more worried about the 8 Hellions that had appeared, and I guess he didn't really have a whole lot of lings. So if they did break through, maybe he would have been in trouble. So he loses the queen, a couple of drones, and it's Clem, so Liberator's probably going to be microed for a while yet. Actually, he's focused on the Hellions himself because he thinks he sees an opportunity. Not actually there. Serral has a wall set up. Or is it?
I like this, though. I really like this. I really like the way that Clem is abusing Serral's wall, because there was only 1 queen there. You had the potential to do a lot of damage to possibly kill the queen, but the lings can never attack you when you have that choke point that small, because it starts to work against the Zerg player, right? Yeah, you can't fit everything through, but neither can I. And lings operate best when they are surrounding things. When they are funneled into small, tight choke points, they usually die.
That's very true. And he can maybe continue to do that, but as his Hellions get killed off or get very, very low, I mean, it's going to be less of an opportunity, right? So maybe it's over for them. They're going to come back and turn to Hellbats to help out with potentially the 2 drops. So either 2 drops and then Hellion harassment, or actually a push to the front wouldn't be a terrible idea. By push to the front, I guess maybe push to the south front, since there's 2 options.
Well, now there's 3 different directions you have to try to attack Serral, right? That's the hard part. That kind of goes back to our earlier discussion. Do you attack the bottom base? Do you try to hit the natural through the direct path? Or do you go all the way around the map to that top side fourth and, you know, like, good luck, you know, getting all the way over there without having to fight 3 armies?
Imagine trying to focus fire banelings when they're on the high ground. I know he had benefacts, but still. Wait. I'm gonna not
that's the tricky part. That's one of the other tricky parts about this map, though, and why a lot of Terrans veto it, because that south path, if you ignore it, because it's like, yeah, it's not that easy to push here, but if you ignore this, then the creep is at your base within like a minute or 2. Like if Serral's able to just spam creep tumors here because the army is trying to attack the natural or that north side of the map, then you die really fast. So this is why I like to see the Terrans push on this place. This is also very close to the Zerg production, but Serral's got a lot of units left here. Those Hellbats are going to soak up a decent amount of the Banelings and the Zerglings, but there's still way too much to actually be broken by this bio attack. And now Clem's going to try to attack from another angle simultaneously. But Serral, I mean, he looks like he's not even sweating in this game, Zombie Grub. He's kind of had dominant control, it feels, the whole way through.
He definitely has. He's done everything pretty damn correctly. So he's in a great position, but Clem hasn't committed or overcommitted, right? Like, maybe he could have done something better. Maybe he could have gotten more damage done. Maybe he could have chosen a more economic build. But as far as the build he chose, he's got plenty of options, right? He's got plenty of options to micro. He's got still a pretty decent push when he wants to do it 2-2 or maybe wait even longer. So I'm not counting Clem out, but Serral is in that scary, Serral Zerg mid-game mode. He's got his Hydras on the way already, and he's got some decent creep spread yet still.
And as we talked about, it's a long path to go up to that northeast side, but I do like that Clem is continuing to keep the pressure on both fronts. Even with creep spread and how fast Zerg units can go, that does become a downside for them if they have to defend both positions at once, because even those speedlings on creep are going to take a couple seconds to actually make it to the bottom half from the top if he gets caught off guard by any of Clem's harass, as Clem continues to try and bring as much pain as he can. Even I think is that the original Reaper that's still chilling in that medevac with the bio? That's cute. He's hanging with the boys. He knows what's what.
Yeah. Gosh, man. And it's not probably going to help the Marines, but maybe it could have helped the Hellions, that Reaper is being used in such great ways from our best Terrans. But anyways, a bunch of racks is now done. Obviously, swapping over into Marauders, adding some tanks, fourth base. Got a real macro game in our hands. He's identified that it's Hydras, so of course that Lurker possibility's got to be in his mind. I don't know if Serral is going to necessarily go for that. It's kind of been Rainer's trademark a little bit more so, but I would love to see it. Here's that push, the 2-2 push, and it's already clearing up a lot of creep spread.
Yeah, this is really important because Serral's also taking that gold base. I don't know if Clem has seen it yet, but if he can gain position control over this spot, he should at least send one unit up there to check. Some of the Banelings are going to come from that direction as he wanted to go for what looked like a flank, but he has mistimed that a bit, not able to get both fronts attacking at once, and that makes this look pretty good. Clem is actually getting a supply lead now. Really good trades. Those two medevacs, shout out to you guys. I have no idea how you've been running around the whole game. Now you're going to die, but shout out to you guys.
I mean, they distracted a handful of units, and Serral thought he had enough in the front, but because of a little bit of that miscalculation, mistiming, it did kind of, snowball a tiny bit into Clem's favor with the trade. But the question is, can it continue to trade out well? Is the momentum actually there? Because so much creep spread has been cleaned up. Serral's also still dealing with a bit of a drop. His upgrades are not going to be done for some time yet. Clem actually with a very aggressive push, trying to take advantage of the situation he's made for himself. And while it might be cleaned up, Serral's supply is looking a little bit weak, and no more links, no more Banelings for the Hydras. That's always a terrifying time for the Zerg.
Yeah, Clem making a fantastic push, and as you said, Zombie Grub, if you see no creep, go in deep. That is how you play Terran versus Zerg. He has carved a path through this slimy, blobby mess of Zerg infestation on the map, and he's trying to make a push now, recognizing, I think he finally realized that gold base was taken. He moves up to it, and Serral taps out. Clem ties this series 1 apiece.
Very nicely done by Clem. I think Serral just had too many things to really keep track of, so that when it did come to that push, he was like, oh, I can take care of this, and then he realized, is at the last second, oh wait, no, I can't. So by then it was already maybe too late. The creep was cleaned up. He'd already taken a pretty inefficient trade, and his Hydras weren't really quite cutting it, dealing with all that harassment. Excellent game. I'm so glad we have a tied up series. We are going to head to a break. When we come back, it's game number 3.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're currently tied 1 apiece here in this Terran versus Zerg best of 5. I'm Nathanius, joined by the wonderful Zombie Grub, and this is the last match of the day. It's been delivering so far, I'd say.
I think so, yeah. I mean, we haven't quite gotten into like 20 minutes sniping ultras, liberator harassment, burrowed banelings, surprise.
Not yet.
Like, we haven't quite gotten there yet, but I feel like it might happen eventually.
Let us pray. Let us pray, Zombie Grub, that we get ourselves a wonderful slugfest of a game. Perhaps here on Death Aura, a map known for its long, very long games from time to time. In the northwest position, spawning as the blue Terran player and taking the first win for himself in that second game, he is Team Liquid's Clem.
In the bottom right, as the red Zerg, he is Serral.
Yeah, Death Aura is a pretty big map, right? I mean, if we were going to have something like that, maybe this would be it. Big things to talk about on this are the anything except for the speed zones in the middle that nobody ever uses. But more interestingly, you've got a good amount of airspace behind both of the bases. Serral is a player that is known for being one of the few guys that gets Overlord speed a bit more than others. But on this map, you may not necessarily need it. Of course, it's a long way to get there, but you've got plenty of spots to kind of keep that Overlord tucked around where that main base is for the follow-up scouts. But it is a big map, and the 5th base is pretty far out for where most Terrans are comfortable grabbing it. We saw as soon as TY actually lost momentum against Raynor on this map, as soon as he lost his momentum and couldn't keep up his attacks, that 5th base was immediately smashed down, along with the attempted 6th. So you're going to have a hard time, I think, splitting this map to a degree if you're not super on top of the allocation of your army defensively. And that's why I would guess we're probably going to see Clem go for another big bio push at 8 racks. It's what makes sense. Try to keep the game from reaching that stage, as many Terran players do, right? That's one of the reasons why that build is popular. You don't want to let the Zerg sit back and do their thing, because there's new scary strategies that folks like Raynor are doing that we don't see very often on the big stage, because that's how freaking scared everybody is of it. No one wants to play versus Raynor's lurkers in TVZ, right? Nobody wants other Zergs to start doing that and have to deal with that too, because then you're like, okay, well, dealing with that army is very, very, very difficult, right? Especially since the range buff, like the ghosts can't just snipe them anymore. You have to be really, really careful about picking that apart. Most Terrans would rather try to slam Marines down your throat until you choke to death, and at least for me, that's my expectation going into this game. But I'd love to see something a little bit more fresh out of Clem. Not quite the variety in the builds I think we'll get out of TY, as we got out of TY though. And that first Reaper getting killed also kind of hurts.
I think I saw Clem go like, yeah, that made sense. Like, he knew he dived. He didn't really deserve to have that Reaper live. Yeah, I mean, all good points. I think what also is something to consider is that Death Aura, while it's a very large map, if you talk about, the winding path through the middle, because the acceleration zones actually really do a whole lot to the rush distance. When you break down the rocks, suddenly, because you take a forward third as a Terran and the Zerg takes like a regular third or fourth to the left, you actually do kind of squeeze it to be a smaller rush distance while also protecting your own third. It's one of the key factors of a Terran's setup of bases is, can I push and defend? So those run bys are a little less deadly. So that is also a reason we sometimes see it. But, we're talking a lot about Clem hampering Serral before X amount of time. I guess we didn't really give Serral credit to do the same to Clem. He's going to go for a Roach Warren, which I think he's going to be very sad about, because Clem not going for just a Liberator, not going for just a Viking, actually going for Banshees. I mean, if he's going to do a Roach attack, this is kind of like the setup you don't want to have happen, a Banshee finding it in the middle of the map.
And Cloak says he's probably going to continue to invest in Banshees. At least 2, I think, is where most Terrans put their cutoff. Banshee's not really great at dealing with queens, but if you can kind of dance around and get some drone kills, they're also going to be phenomenal at defending against roaches. Just 1 doesn't really cut it, but 2 is where things start to get a bit nicer. And actually going for this armory as well, if the Hellions are forced to defend at home, Hellbats fare much better than Hellions at defending these types of roach attacks. They're more vulnerable, but Hellbats actually deal pretty serious damage, especially if they're hitting more than one roach with each attack. But it is an interesting thing to see Serral go for, because it makes me wonder if he's misread something, that he thinks that there's going to be like battle cruisers coming, and he's like, all right, if I just attack him, I could possibly kill him. But when you see more than one Banshee on the map as a Zerg player, and you're building Ravagers and Roaches before your before your third base is saturated, that's when I think you start to get a little bit scared. But he does have he's got 9 more drones building. He just finished a round of like 6 or 7. So he is going to saturate his base behind this. I just, I don't see this attack doing a lot of damage as long as Clem is aware, and he looks very aware. The Hellions see this. Just send both your Banshees to where these Ravagers are, right? And can't really do a whole lot.
I love what Serral's trying to do, though. Like, as soon as he saw the Banshee, that's when he started droning, because he did make lings, and that's usually not a good thing. But I love that he's trying to do something with it, right? Like, the lings go to the right, where the roaches go to the left, so maybe you find nothing on either side, or the wrong thing on either side, right? Banshees on top of lings isn't going to kill them very fast. It's not working, but I mean, I love that he's attempting it, right? And also a good block against the Hellions, because that would have been a surprise for the Terran player to be like, actually, I'm going to go after you. Still excellent play from both players, but Serral did put himself in the rougher position just with a build order he chose, and realized he couldn't really execute.
Yeah, the Hellions are going to come back in towards his third base, going for a backstab with those units outside the natural, and the Banshees are here too, able to get a lot of damage done on the Ravagers without detection, which is a kind of an unusual mishap. Okay, well, that Spore Crawler was weirdly positioned and actually becomes quite useful, but the Ling counter at the same time doesn't really get too many SCVs, but the cost is these Marines, and then okay, maybe now it's going to get a bunch of SCV kills. The Banshees, weirdly enough, I thought that was like, man, that was so good, but then that Spore was in just like an anti-battle cruiser position, it almost felt like, and then ends up kind of giving that toss serve for Clem's Banshees to get shut down. But he's still killing a lot of drones. It's a bit of a bloodbath on both sides.
Yeah, a lot of distraction on both sides, right? Clem, I think, accurately realizing, well, if your Lings did that, then they're not back at home, and Roaches, they're a little bit slow. So does use his Hellion to dive in, and then also on top of that, I hope you don't make a bunch of Lings. You're not going to have a bunch of Lings. You just sacrifice them, so my Hellions don't need to be back at home anyways. So sacks them for 10 drone damage. It does suck that he lost that Banshee, just because I think he was distracted, but still keeping one alive for some scouting, creep denial is still, like, okay. And I still do like Clem's position, even as he lost a good handful of Marines and really shouldn't have been taking damage on that Ling run by. I still like Clem's position. Serral's going to maybe find another good run by, though. Perfect timing. Once again, this time no supply depot even raised, so finds a fresh mule. That's always nice. Brings the army back. Serral knows how to bring himself back in the games.
Yeah, doing a really good job with that backstab right there. Every little move like that is so nice, especially as you called out. Fresh mule. Rains down from the sky, instantly picked apart by a pack of wild Zerglings. And that is a good way to start off his third game for Serral. But he's going to have to deal with now the double medevac drop making its way over. I love that he's going to bring a drop himself for Banelings. This Overlord is pretty hurt, but there's no missile turrets because only bad players build missile turrets, Zombie Grub, especially when you don't see Mutalisks on the map. Not yet, at least. So Clem is going to make this push over towards that third base. Now, the interesting thing is, if the army wasn't here for even half a second, even if the drones run away, his evolution chambers are a pretty prime target, which you usually don't have such access to without dropping the main.
Natural's going to get rained on.
Put some ice on it.
Good stuff there from Serral. I noticed Rainer adding in some yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever it was, but I didn't think Serral was going to set it up, but it worked out. One side didn't do so much, but it was a distraction. And then just enough back at home that the double drop really isn't going to do a whole lot. Serral, I mean, Clem just kind of grimaces a little bit. The game does go on. He's going up to 4 bases. He's not dependent on momentum like he was with those 8 Raxes, but it does still suck. Like, he's going to have to be paying more attention to it now.
And I wonder if we're going to see a transition from Clem at some point, since it doesn't seem to be that it's going to be just that Mega Rax all in. I want to see some ghosts. I want to see maybe Thor get mixed in. I want to see a missile turret. Missile turret for 500, please. As these mutas coming in, ravaging this already ravaged base. It's like, man, and mutas didn't really do a lot of damage, did they, Zombie Grub? It's like, well, you see, the Banelings already killed all the workers. There wasn't much left to do.
Yeah, a little bit. A single Ling caught sight of these medevacs, so Serral is trying to rush back, but maybe a little bit late to it. Nah, he's good. Good job, single Ling. But on the, meanwhile, the left side, canceled hatchery. Still some damage as Clem sets up his 4th base, now putting the pressure on Serral's side of the map instead of just letting the mutas run over him. It's always nice finding a couple of banelings, not so much, and not finding that creep queen either, but we just talked about the creep for a little bit. Even though everything else for Serral seems like it's been like a hunky-dory game, nothing really happened, I do think his lack of creep is maybe the biggest result of the lopsided opener that he's had. He has like literally 1 extra queen, right? There's 4 bases, 5 queens to spread creep, so it's not that great.
Yeah, this is going to be really, really, really important couple of moments coming up, though. As you said, without that creep spread, Clem's ability to attack is it's magnified, right? He could do a lot more damage potentially, since the other side effect of creep that we don't always talk about a tremendous amount outside of move speed increase, it's vision for the Zerg. If the Zerg has creep tumors somewhere, they can see everything around there. They can see all the area of the creep that they're giving that they're generating. So makes it a little bit trickier to be aware, but Serral has still been on top of this. He's going to clean up this double drop. The Mutalisks are here, and a massive Zergling run by Zombie Grub goes into the natural expansion. It's got to be like 45 Zerglings or something getting around the natural wall, getting into that mineral line, and trying to make their way into that main base. I don't know that they're going to be able to buy enough time to get through the natural main wall, but had they been able to do that and get an add-on or two, that gets terrifying. Even the armory is not a bad target here, but only kills 3 SCVs at the end of the day. So I guess Clem's crisis management, not too shabby.
I guarantee everyone else has just like lost 50 SCVs, right? Like, no, that was pretty impressive.
Else loses the game there to Serral.
Not that he did necessarily anything, I guess, too special, but his army was like still close enough back at home, and he did have an immediate pull in those SCVs. So really nicely done. That was enough lings to really tear apart a Terran's momentum, tear apart their economy, make them just sit at home. And Clem was actually still eager to get on the map with even the threat of more run bys. It's still giving Serral that time to get more creep spread. About a minute ago, I was talking about it, and in that minute, it's actually done a decent job getting to the middle of the map. So it's something to work with, but still not exactly where Serral would want to be.
So here's the other benefit of the creep spread, though, not being as great as you typically want it to be, as another Ling run by is going to go over to that natural, but the doors are closed. However, the depots, I think, might actually still burn down. But I was trying to say that he's got a good position to stage a big attack off. But I guess Serral realized that, and that's why he's doing this big counterattack. He's saying, no, you don't get to slowly pick away at the creep because you're outside my base. Now I'm going to make you bring everything home, or we're going to get into a weird base trade situation while I've got 50 banelings on the defense. So good luck with that. Natural expansion is completely forfeit. I do feel like it wouldn't be terrible to try to kill the orbital, but he's going to go for the rest of the SCVs in the main while these banelings and ravagers continue to just slowly, he's just throwing stuff at this bio army because he knows it's not getting any bigger. Everything back home is dying as it comes out of the barracks or being sent to deal with those mutas. So if he wears this down enough, he's going to be in a great spot. And we do have 3 turrets here, but not in great position to repair all of them. Actually, doesn't even try to repair any of them. And that means that the 4th base for Clem is also going to be shut down. And Zombie Grub, this is a big Terran army, but I'm not sure that this is going to be enough to win in the game with all the damage he's taking at home.
Yeah, that's the question. Marines splitting to their very last, and a couple more Marines on the right side, but a lot more banelings on the right side. So Clem's army is not going to be able to push through. He didn't really have like a defined target either. He really wanted to go for the head, but the head was just so far away. He didn't even get like a tail or a toe with his 5th hatch. Like, it did not work out. Clem took so much damage. If it was only the natural, it's not as big of a deal, but it was a natural main and 4th base. He knew he was committed. He couldn't really return home, either. Just perfect timing for Serral to run in like he did.
Yeah, that's brutal. Absolutely, absolutely brutal. I mean, this is textbook ZVT. This is what you want. Big backstabs. The Terran, the weakness of Terran is that you're not going to be able to have a lot of stuff left at home to defend without investing thousands into planetaries, or they have to leave their army at home. So how do they attack you if their army is at home? Well, they can't. So Clem needs to push. He needs to deal damage, and that opens him up to these massive counterattacks. The 3rd command center is dead, and I don't see how the rest of the forces that are left at home can deal with this either. He's going to go for the planetary, which is the last somewhat defended place, but just 2 missile turrets are not going to be able to cut it. And everything else here is going to die while Clem's army deals with Ravager, Ling, Bane. Gets a good shot off with his tank, but these Marines need to win the game for him here while everything else back home dies. And it's just so hard pushing onto creep against banelings. It's, there's very little that you can do in these situations because Serral still has a lot of economy. He can kind of give away a few of these bases, but right, command center that just died for Clem. You can't afford to give that away.
No, that was the planetary, the 5th base, the would-be 5th base, plus the 3rd all going down. Clem did do a pretty good job attacking into Serral's 4th, but I don't think he really cared about his 4th that much. He could have probably even given it up and just made more banelings to be really, really safe. Clem, he knows he's done, but he's thinking maybe my army can really do it. Serral, run into my Widowmine, please. That'd be great.
Like, hypothetically speaking, if every single Zergling and Banling completely clumps up into the AoE of the 3 Widowmines left, he could swing 70 supply in 2 seconds, but unfortunately, this isn't.
It's pretty good.
This is not the Will It Blend channel. This is the StarCraft channel. We do not have a super machine capable of grinding literally anything into particulate that would be awful for your lungs. Great splits, phenomenal splits. When you're at 60 supply, I'm not sure it's the turning point yet. This army's doing a really good job of staying alive, but he doesn't have anything at home.
Yeah, it's like literally base race. If he had 3 orbitals still mining away, I'm like, oh my god, he's done it. But it is literal base race. Like, he still have to deal with the mutas back at home, which he's now going to do. But even though he took some decent trades, he didn't set Serral back down to his original 2 bases.
Yeah, brutal. Yeah, 2-1 lead now for Serral. I was gonna say something about, like the old adage, right? When you're on top of the Terran production, everything that comes out just dies instantly. It can't group together, but I don't think that those 2 half racks really count as production by that point of the game. Just Serral did an absolutely beautiful job of, he said, every single time that you're gonna try to move out and do something, Clem, I'm gonna stab you in the back with a knife. And you're like, how is that possible? You're in front of me. And he's like, well, that's just, that's why they're so good. You don't really get how they're always able to pull these moves off. Not every Zerg can do it. Most Zergs can't. But Clem and Serral, well, there's a reason why they're 2 of the best Zergs in the entire universe.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of things that I was kind of like pondering about towards the end of that game. I didn't get to check, but like, I do wonder if maybe he was worried it'd be more like Lane Baneling Ravager, because, his missile turret wasn't there for the first Mutaflock, and that did help kind of buy Serral a lot of time. And then he had kind of an odd combination of tanks and Widowmines. And when I was like, what is this? And I looked back at his double factory, it was 2 tech labs. So I feel like one of the reasons that kind of snowballed like it did was that he did not have as many Widowmines as we've grown accustomed to. That's one thing that Clem has really been good with, is Widowmines. And it's one thing Serral says that more Terrans should do, is focus on Widowmine production, right? So there was that. And then I guess the second one's a little more lame, but just, the obvious, like, I really wish they'd put out sensor towers a lot faster. Like, I know they get picked off, but gosh, sensor tower around even the planetary, like that little bit of extra vision, little notice, like I feel like it'd still be good.
No, I completely agree. When I see games like this, and especially as you bring up that both factories had tech labs on them, it makes me think back to when they first nerfed the Widowmine so that it basically didn't kill anything anymore. When they're like, yeah, we're gonna make the damage on its AoE fall off so that these units are worthless. And then there was like a match between, I think it was Polt and Scarlet in WCS America or something, like forever ago. And everyone was like, well, mines aren't super great anymore, right? It's hard to be cost effective and get the big hits with them. And at least my brain draws parallels from that to this. And I'm like, well, Polt's solution to that was he went like 3 factory with 2 reactors, and he built a shit ton of Widowmines and actually had some insane positions and fights against like a Scarlet who was like also in her prime at that time as well. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know, is 2 factories enough support for Terrans with these builds against these styles? We haven't seen anybody really try to adjust, but I don't know. Maybe down the line, that's something to keep our eyes open for if Terrans ever head back in that direction. Either way, we're loaded into Eternal Empire for game number 4. And in the top right, 1 map win away for another dance with Raynor. He is Serral.
In the bottom left, as the blue Terran, he is Team Liquid's Clem. Really tough game to lose for Clem because, I mean, he defended against the Ling Ravager, even with the kind of awkward Lings getting in after the fact that killed a couple of SCVs and a handful of Maroons. He defended against something that was partially committed to. Roaches were made, Ravagers were made, about 16 Lings were made. That was, that is, I'm going to attack. It wasn't just the Roach Warren and then, oh, I'm not going to do it. Like, I feel like it's one of those games where you're like, oh, I had that, didn't I? Question? And you start questioning yourself and like what you've actually done. But it was Serral buying a lot of that time. Even with the quote-unquote ineffective run buys, he still bought time to kind of cover his weaknesses after the production of those units.
Yeah. And it's a really difficult position to play from when those backstabs hit you. But at the same time, if you couldn't make plays like that happen, how do you deal with a Terran player that's rallying 8 barracks of Marines with Widow Mines to your front door if you can't get counterattack damage done to pull them away, right? Like, these are the key points of winning ZVT that players like Serral and Reyna are just so attuned to. They seem to be always aware of how much they can get away with pulling out of their defense to go for those backstabs, and that is what keeps the Terran honest. Because otherwise, you would just rally everything to the front line the whole time, like it's part of the swarm. And you know, there was only like maybe one player really back then who actually was able to punish Terrans in those situations that we don't really talk about anymore, right? It took years for other Zerg players to be able to find those gaps, to make those things happen. And that to me is the most impressive part about Serral and Reyna's gameplay. And to a growing degree, guys like Rogue, although I see him more of, he just has like gnarly build orders and control.
Yeah. He just bludgeons people, like him in Dark, right?
Yeah.
Like as
He
good
beats
as they
people
are.
to death with a hammer. That's what Rogue does. Rogue's the hammer man.
Exactly, yeah.
He's like, oh, isn't that a bit crude of a tool to use to win GSLs? He's like, there you go. The guy who asked that question is dead now too.
Yeah, him and Dark have that in common. It's really tough. You know, it's one thing I think Clem has sometimes done very well against. Like, I don't want to be that person and be like, you know, like, oh, he's ushering in a new age. He really is the Messiah. But I mean, his speed and his usage of his Widow Mines have been sometimes, it feels like a head above anyone else, including the Korean Terrans, right? So I feel like his Widow Mines are his strength. And last game, he got hampered a little bit. He got hamstringed, I guess, from the mix-up that was still adding in some roaches.
Yeah,
we see him go
that's
for
a really
Widow
good
Mines. I'm not talking about offensive. I'm talking about burrowed Widow Mines to clear out 30 of those 45 blinks, right, for the defensive. So that's what I would like to see.
I miss seeing more of like those, hey, these are the choke points where the units that are running through would have to go to. Like on this map, there are so many little ramps and cliffs that people use for general transport. But you're like, man, putting mines in these types of places really help, right? Because that's not where the player is looking. The Zerg is going to look at their units when they send them out or like when they're about to attack. But most people, you know, you send 2 medevacs around the side, you're not going to look at them until they're almost at the enemy's base. So that's the kind of thing I think about when I think about the Widow Mines, is that a lot of people also just focus really heavily on either having them in their base, like anti-muta, or in the opponent's base where they're more likely to get cleaned up and killed.
Clem going for a Hellbat attack. He did successfully deny vision from Serral. It kind of looked normal. He only saw 2 Marines, not all 4 of them, right? So this is a late Bailing Nest for this purpose, right? It's exactly what Clem was hoping for. He was hoping for a fast fire build on Eternal Empire, which is very, very popular. And even with that in mind, the Bailing Nest was a little bit later than usual on that.
Ooh,
so a Hellbat attack was absolutely perfect.
Good shuffle. I mean, you could win the game off of a push like this. That Bailing Nest, crazy late. The lair will have no impact here. And if you can only build Lings and then you've got Hellbats inside of a choke point with the Queen's dead, well, you're dead in that situation. I really like the way that Clem also, once he built the reactor with his barracks, he actually continued to just produce those Marines one at a time for this attack. There's a Liberator that's following up with this too. So, to be honest with you, Zombie, I think we did a really good job of not just saying what we could have said, which was, guys, this game's looking pretty bleak since there's no Bailing Nest. But here we are, going into game number 5.
Oh, man. As I was saying, the Bailing Nest already going to be late with the build he chose, and then it was even later, I think, than some other variations. Yeah. So very good idea from Clem. Was hoping it was going to be a fast fire build in general on a map that is very popular for it, and then the execution was also very good. Serral looked quite upset, as he has been in general, so yeah, it feels like his loss are getting to him more and more. We'll see whose mentality breaks through for the win in game number 5, which is coming up after the break.
Well, it all comes down to this one final map today to decide who gets to go up against Rainer here at the DreamHack Masters season finals. I'm Nathanius, joined by Zombie Grub. Hope you guys have been enjoying this match because it's been pretty freaking wild. And this is it. Pillars of Gold to decide everything for all the marbles.
Ooh, I feel like this is a really tough game 5 for the Terran. I don't know, man. It feels like the last time I've seen Clem on this map and then like Innovation on this map, like they went for the 8 racks all in and it did not work against Serral. It just straight up didn't. But unfortunately, it's one of those maps where it feels difficult to play out a longer game than that, kind of like we were talking about on Death, or it can be kind of applied to Pillars of Gold. So I don't know. I feel a little bit better for this guy in the top right, despite his very much so anger at that last loss. It is the red Zerg, Serral.
Yeah, definitely going to need to see something flashy out of this guy in the bottom left to win here. In the blue from Team Liquid, he's Clem.
I love his decision to go for the Hellbent attack on Eternal Empire. Like, just
really good. It's such it's one of those things where you like have impressions of players in your head, and Clem is such this. I mean, look at him. You guys can see him. He's freaking adorable. He's a handsome guy, and he doesn't appear very threatening. I'm sorry, he doesn't. He looks like the kind of guy that gets straight A's at schools and promises to have your daughter home by 9 p.m. Okay, but throwing in that cheese is exactly why he is such a good StarCraft player. That maybe cheese is stretching it, but throwing in that type of attack with such a dedicated, committed attack. It really is. You get the bop it win, right? You get to just bop them because you didn't build a Baneling nest. You can't just defend that type of play with just Lings. It doesn't really work. You have to either have like some weird number of queens. I don't know. You go for the Rainer 10, 13, what was it? 15 queen opener on 2.5 bases. But otherwise, no, really fun to see. And I still want to see Clem do something wild. The way this SCV is moving is getting that scouting information very important. I love seeing SCV scouts in TVZ. Very, very important as he gets his way up there. And command center building in the natural, marine follow-up to go with this. All very standard, but Zombie Grub, I want to see him do something wild. I want to see like double BCs or a 2 factory. I think trying to play straight up vanilla TVZ on this map is just I think it's a fool's folly, and it can work, sure, if you get lucky, but you're just generally not going to be in a position to make the same types of plays you would be on other maps, because that third base is so open and exposed. You can't just slam down 7 spines or something crazy like that and forget about it. You need to nobody planetaries their third, and it's not cheap to throw down 4 bunkers and fill them all with your whole army either at that position. Makes moving out very difficult on Pillars of Gold. We see backstabs win games here every day.
Serral did go for a gas pool opener. He didn't really commit much to it, but with a faster speed, it's a little bit scary. It's been thoroughly scouted too. Like the SCV was scouting, which is really nice. The Reaper, I think, has a better idea as to what it is, being chased by a Ling with speed this fast. So it doesn't sound like it's a good opener for Serral to do that and then be found out and then not do anything with it. But I actually kind of like it just for like all the things you've said. Like I feel like this puts the power to Serral for a little while. Obviously when you get 4, 6 Hellions, you realize, oh, they're not doing anything. Okay, the game goes on. But I do still think that with the threat being started by Serral, even if he didn't actually kind of carry through with it, Clem had to respect that, right? He did get a bunker, and maybe he adds on a gas and gets a starport instead of going for a 3cc build because he's like, oh god, what is it? So I actually still kind of like it, but yeah, Serral's not doing very much with it. Certainly his Ling speed for the Hellions, but I mean, not as many queens, right? Because the natural Hashi was late. It's 2 Hellions.
Serral has never really struck me as the mass queen guy. I don't think that he's at least, I'm sure it happens every now and again, but he's a guy that likes to use his units, likes to get around the map, deal damage and all that. But this map, the creep spread on the bottom of that ramp is very important. There is that high ground. It's weird, right? Is it high ground? Is it not? Is it though? That position where people try to siege the main from? And that's like the big advantage for Terran on this map. There's two things that are really good for Terran that everybody should try to use if you get the opportunity. And it's these two high grounds outside where this third base is for Serral. And it's that high ground base below the main where you can try to set up a siege position. We've seen players build bunkers and all sorts of crazy stuff there. Put the tanks on the high ground or put the tanks on the low ground. Use that to get that position. But you really need to take a creative approach to defending your third base, whichever one you go for, because this isn't one of those maps where you just rally out and everything goes past your base and you're totally safe, right? You're going to need to build like 7 or 8 buildings to maybe block off from run-bys with either of those expansions.
Serral, funnily enough, going for the fastest spire, particularly 1-3 bases, like skipping the Baliness entirely to do this. And I think that does have to do with, like, one, who would hellbat attack twice, despite not being, you know, he's not the person to do that, right, as you were saying. And then also, because I opened up and scared him, I don't think he'll do anything to me. So it is a risk, but I think it's a very smart risk to take. His Spire is going to be obnoxiously fast, so the mutas actually do get a chance to be on the other side of the map before they necessarily have to worry about dealing with drops or pushes. And, well, the downside is that Tunical Hooks is going to be pushed off for a very long time. That is absolutely a downside. And the other downside is that it was just scouted. So there's also that.
Yeah, the Spire play is definitely something to keep our eyes out for. I got this mesmerized by how that Liberator kept bouncing back and forth while also Serral moving his spores and keeping himself safe against it, but also simultaneously defending against the Hellions. Really hard to control the defense on both sides here for the Zerg. And it is nice that Clem was able to see that Spire. I'm not 100% sure that he clicked on it, but if you have that awareness, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say the darkest, most cursed thing I could possibly say, Zombie Grub. Build more than one turret if you get the opportunity and you want to move out and you're worried about being counterattacked. Once those guys start coming in and bringing the pain, don't leave yourself vulnerable to those counterattacks. If you can mitigate it in any way, you really should try to lean a little bit harder, specifically on this map. I'm not going to say you need to do it on every map, but it's very easy for the mutas to also jump between where the production and the mineral line in the main is and that third base expansion as well. So this is a big moment because that Baneling Nest is not ready and Clem has a big army showing up.
Yeah. Clem, I think he figured it out, right? Like it's not just the fast fire, but he's like, I think I know what I can do against that fast fire. He's hitting far before 1-1 is done. He's not even like, he knew exactly what to do.